nature and doing something that you don't completely understand up here in the cloud?
I mean, I suppose that's always a danger, but we're not even near to the case where it could be dangerous yet, so not too much.
It's almost like an on-off switch for a thunderstorm.
That's the idea behind it.
Right here in the cloud.
Yep.
In Orlando, Dave Malkoff, the weather
If civilians doing this,
Absolutely
all right,
fascinating. And
imagine what the military,
like these areas of drought that we're watching in the West, if it actually worked. All right, let's move on to sports.
That was amazing. I saw those lasers at a cabaret in Tampa.
It made it rain there too. But this morning I'm gonna start. Okay, we made it rain there too. So you guys are starting to get an idea of where technology's at. All right, technology is way more advanced than where we've been led to believe. The link. Hey Jake, are you gonna send that video to me? I'm gonna play it before I end the session. Can you send it to me now? He said he has a chemtrail video that he wants me to include in the. But I personally think that these are scapegoats. All right. So, woman accused of intentionally starting fires on Highway 101 arrested. This champion right here is winner. All right, winner, chicken dinner. All right, Salinas, California, Keon, the California Highway Patrol confirms. All right, so the California Highway Patrol confirms that a woman has been arrested after being accused of intentionally starting fires. All right, they said it happened on Highway 101 here on the road, and it was first reported just after 9 a.m. All right, the number of fires was not released. The suspect, identified as 37-year-old Anita E, is booked into the Montreal County Jail for arson. All right, so yeah, we have, obviously they're going to have people in Antifa beating everybody up and doing everything they're not supposed to be doing, and then they completely hijacked the BLM movement. But based off videos I'm showing to you guys right now, the serious forest fires that are happening in California and that region, there has to be something more. All right, especially if Q is queuing that on us on a Q map and showing us to specifically look at that. There's more going on than just an independent person setting off forest fires. All right, these are patsies. That's what this is. This is a patsy. All right, she probably suffered some type of MK Ultra programming or manipulation, or whatever the case may be, and they caught her. All right, but she's not one that's setting off fires. And the ones that are burning acres and acres and acres of land where you're driving through the highway, and on both sides of the highway you're seeing nothing but flames. All right, there's something else that's setting off these forest fires at the level and at the magnitude that they are the power. All right, well, he sent that. I'm just curious about the video that Kelia sent over. Let me look at that so we can chat about. Where was it? It's over here somewhere. Okay. So, SGT report. This is an awesome YouTube channel. I've actually mentioned this to you guys before. SGT report and We Know News.
American Dream.
And X22.
Attach a single family home. That is being erased. That's no longer going to be permitted. Everybody, if you tell me you live in a single family home, you are going to be a pariah.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Thank you so very much for tuning in. And happy Veterans Day. A special thank you to all of those who have served our nation. And to those who have served our nation and have woken up to the fact that so many of the wars we have fought have been contrived, bankers, wars. God bless you folks, especially for speaking out and speaking truth. We don't need any more wars. We don't need to go to war in Syria, wars in Iran. We certainly don't need a war with Russia. So God bless the truth tellers. And again, happy Veterans Day. On the line with me right now is our good friend Sophia Smallstorm. And for those who have braved these California fires, to me, another contrivance of the banksters. God bless you folks. I hope you haven't been burned out. And if you have, I pray that you can rebuild. We're not sure how that's going to shake out given UN Agenda 2030's strategy to herd us all into large cities. And, you know, Sophia's latest newsletter, her Avatar Update, really talks about this stuff specifically. And I'd like to read a passage from it in a second. But first, let me welcome Sophia. Hi, Sophia.
Hi, Sean. How are you? Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming back on. You emailed me just the other day, and I wanted to squeeze you in here because I think what you have to say is important. And if I may, let me just read this from Current News Today, November 11th, as we're having this conversation. Of course, this comes from the New York Times. The title of the article is Rebirth, Angst, and the New Normal of California Wildfires. We just keep hitting us with this messaging, Sophia. This is the new normal. And as you wrote in your newsletter here, I thought this was a great newsletter. You're talking about being without power when PG&E decided to turn off the power for your safety. And you wrote, quote, on my second powerless morning, deprived of the computer and sipping my gas stove heated cup of tea, I chanced upon a missed issue of Harper's Magazine from August 2018. And lo and behold, it had a huge double feature on wildfires. You go on. The world is on fire, the article began. Of the 4.5 million homes put at risk by wildfires in America in 2017, 2 million were in California. In sub-Saharan Africa, over 150,000 people die each year from wildfires. The two parts of the magazine feature address megafires in Missouri, Montana, and pine forests in Portugal, both of which burned more than 100,000 acres. Here's the juicy part, folks. Harper's admits before 1995 there was barely one megafire per year in the world. But in the last decade, there have been 10 per year. And Sophia, I think this is your addendum. Let's remind ourselves that aerosols containing aluminum began to be sprayed in the late 1990s. I could go on. I suppose people should read this awesome newsletter for themselves. Do you want to tell people how they can get it in case they do want to read it for themselves?
Yeah, the newsletter is by subscription, and it goes out by snail mail, which enables people to read it carefully. You could snuggle up by the fire with a little dog biscuit and read it. And I send these out monthly. It's a minimum $50 donation per year. There is a tab. If you go to my blog, sophiasmallstorm.com, there's a little thing icon in the left margin that explains where to send the check or money order. And that's the way I do it. You know, it's snail mail hard copy, so you really concentrate and you don't get interrupted.
Well, what are your thoughts here on the fires? I mean, evidently Harper's wants us to understand that this is the new normal, just like the New York Times does. And I guess when you take into account UN Agenda 2030, it probably is the new normal, but I think it's a contrived new normal.
Sean, yes, definitely. In our community, we know that these fires are contrived. They're artificially created and inflamed. But what I wanted to get into in from this Harper's article, things that I learned that I have never known before. And what I have found is that if you read an in-depth mainstream journalistic piece, if you have the eyes that we have in our community, you can really see very deeply into it, and you can start connecting dots that you weren't aware of that even connected before. And that's why I wanted to write a newsletter on the fires, because we were in this red alert warning that they are giving us, and they're now deliberately shutting down power. Last year in November, they cut our power for 16 hours. They didn't tell us why. In my little community of neighbors and homes, we thought, oh, there's something going on with the grid. Yes, it was warm, but we didn't have fire conditions. But this year, they warned us ad nauseum beforehand that now we are in fire season. So October worldwide is fire season. This is the new normal, okay? And they're warning people in certain experimental testing grounds, in California is one, that you may have a wildfire, it may come and burn up your house, and we are going to cut the power because the new normal explanation is that it's downed power lines from the wind that start these fires in wilderness or scrubby or brushy areas. Now, Sean, back in the early 2000s, the 1990s, when we did have what I'll just call wildfires, we were told that it was arsonists, just these crazy people who would go and deliberately light a fire somewhere and then enjoy the result. But the arsonist explanation has evaporated. Now we're told downed power lines. So I looked this up. Why are down power lines causing fires? Well, guess what? They don't insulate power lines. This is the norm in the utility world. They believe that air is an adequate insulator of high voltage power lines. When the power lines cross through, now get this, densely wooded areas, then they insulate them. So they won't insulate power lines that are just in open air. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that's obscene, and they should probably be burying these power lines. But PG&E is going to use the excuse that I guess they don't earn enough money to be able to maintain their lines properly, which begs the question, Sophia, why is this happening only in California? I guess it's not. It's happening all over the country, but we only hear this about the power lines in PG&E. I guess it's not windy anywhere else in this country. There are no other neighborhoods burning to the ground every single year because of their power company. I mean, what's going on here with PG&E? I think you know, I think I know, but why don't you tell the audience?
Well, Sean,
it's the eucalyptus tree. This is an import to California. It's also an import to Portugal. And this is why my newsletter, this particular analysis is so different from what people might expect. So the eucalyptus tree is an extremely oily tree. It's an Australian native. Remember that song, Kookaburra sits in the old tree? That is the Tasmanian blue gum. And that was brought from Australia by a guy who was half Australian and half German to Europe, to Portugal. And it was brought to California and elsewhere in the world. To California, railroad ties.
I believe this was an experiment
Proving ground, 2017, for some of these new theories about fire, the conventional theories, the cover story theories. And there were two huge megafires that were written about in this Harper's piece. Megafire is what burns more than 100,000 acres. And as you quoted from the newsletter and the article, in the last decade, we've had 10 megafires per year worldwide. But before 1995, we barely had one. So what is the causal agent of so much, let's call it fire, fire-worthy, non-fire-proofness in the world? There's an aluminum that's been sprayed by geoengineering plants, which is an accelerant, fire, combustible, conductive material on the ground, and it's absolutely saturated the flora and fauna everywhere. So let's just get into Portugal. Portugal is the country in the world right now. They had a mega fire in 2017 in the month of June. They have 90% ownership of private ownership of forests. Okay, now let's put on our Agenda 21 hats. Portugal didn't have that, but forest ownership became popular in the 1800s when the government said to landowners, why don't you all plant some trees as a form of a savings account? And it wasn't just landowners, there were peasants, there were all kinds of people. Normal people started buying trees, and the eucalyptus came in because classically in Portugal, naturally you have the pine tree, which grows to many, many countries. But pines are harvested every 30 to 40 years. And eucalyptus can be harvested every 10 years. They grow very, very fast. So when the Australian eucalyptus was brought to Portugal, the Portuguese people, if they owned a little bit of forest, their green savings account, they could have a harvest which would bring them a few thousand, today it's euros, every few years. So the government encouraged this. And what happened was that the new people, the new type of eucalyptus and pine owner was not clearing underbrush. And it's really underbrush that puts land at risk for fire, because especially when there are droughts, especially when there's artificial weather, very mild winters. So what has happened is in Portugal, lots of people have crops of trees, but they don't clear what's called dog hair, the underbrush that grows, the spindly stuff on the ground. And with the eucalyptus trees in particular, they are very, very flammable because the eucalyptus oil in the leaves, it's even been used as a motor fuel. So the leaves are very thick, they grow in these crowns in these tall trees, and the eucalyptus bark.
The eucalyptus is such a fast grower, it's like a perpetual adolescent. It's always shedding bark, shedding bark. Anyone who lives in California, where there are tons of eucalyptus trees, can see the bark just dangling, twisting in the wind. So I think they are conducting this experiment in California because it's so big, it's so full now, I'll mention this later, immigrants and eucalyptus trees. So, do you want to ask me any questions? Should I pause? I don't know.
Yeah, let me jump in because what I was driving at when I mentioned PG&E is I thought maybe you would bridge into smart meters. Let me read this from your article under Wind and Wilderness. By the way, we continue to be programmed by Harper's and the mainstream media that it's global warming that's the root of all of this. That's why we need to give up all our forms of energy, folks. We need to give up our gasoline-powered cars. We need to give up natural gas. We can't heat our homes with these forms of energy. In the name of saving the planet, we have to give it all up. The UN Agenda 2030, and it was previously called Agenda 21, as Sophia just mentioned. UN Agenda 21, UN Agenda 2030, same thing. Give it all up, all of our forms of energy. We need to live at, literally, in their words, 17th century living standards.
Because they claim in the Climate Action Plan, usage must be reduced to 1750. This is back in the 1700s, where we did not use equipment or machinery to drop the greenhouse gas emissions effectively so that we can prevent the weather from changing.
So 17th century serfs is how they want us to live in the future in order to save the planet. And in your newsletter, Sophia, you quote Harper's, quote, Wilderness has a better grasp of global warming than we do. This comes from writer Richard Manning. And then you wrote, here's what I was getting at when I mentioned PG&E. On the same page here in your newsletter, you wrote, strangely, in Santa Rosa and in Paradise, someone I happen to know inspected the houses that were left standing. The surprise, each of them had an analog meter, not a smart meter. In some videos I saw, the smart meters looked particularly scorched, as though the fires had started there. Smart meters, I am told, are not grounded, unlike analog meters, which have a special copper bar that connects to the building's electrical ground. Now, does that suggest something? A giant deliberate voltage spike that could easily torch the underground meter and go on to ignite the house? I'm just speculating. The arsonists we used to hear about have been replaced with uninsulated power lines. The wind and the wilderness are deploying fire to move us into safe, smart, urban homes. All right, I read quite a bit there, Sophia. The point is, we've got eucalyptus trees, which you mentioned. We have aluminum spraying, which is certainly helpful in starting and spreading these fires. And then we have these smart meters. Do you want to talk a little bit about PG&E and these smart meters as being involved potentially in these contrived fires?
I can, but before I do that, Sean, I want to bring in the term that was so spectacular for me when I read it in this article, and I don't believe people in the alternative world are familiar with it because no one has ever used it to my knowledge before. It is called the WUI, and it's on page 5 of my newsletter. The bottom of page 5, left column, that's where you'll see it. WUI is WUI. It's an acronym for Wildland Urban Interface. So the reason the WUI is so important is because in the western United States, that's where 2 million new homes have been built between 1990 and 2010. The western United States is full of federal wilderness areas and federal forests, national forests. And let me point this out. Over the past decade or so, we've had drought all over the West, and particularly California. Dane Whittington of Geoengineering Watch has correctly pointed out that all of our winter storms, they gather and congregate above us, but then they're shunted through artificial weather modification means, shunted over to the Midwest and the East. So the western United States has been very, very dry. And all of the moisture, for instance, in Montana, the dog hair, the little spindly trees that grow at high elevations, the forest is at low elevation, the big trees. But the little trees are at high elevation, and they normally are fire resistant because they hold a lot of moisture and they hold snow. But what's happening? As the fire term goes, it carries the fire from the wilderness area to the urban area. People might live in. But also the modern developer has built very close to national forests. And it's these tracts, these houses that they're calling ladder fuel, that port the fires from the wilderness that they'll tell us are naturally created, even if it's down power lines. They'll say this tends to happen. But now all you selfish, bad, unthinking people who built in these fringe areas of the urban city. To prepare the way.
Okay. Okay. And it's kind of dark, so you can't see it there. Until you go ahead and go to that sun itself, this looks like it's a good point. Cottage.
Sorry, guys, I didn't realize I was muted.
Excuse me, how did it do page? All right. Not familiar with the school, but they have this very interesting tool for radar. Maybe they're one of those like weather people schools. But watch this. Take a look at this. I'm gonna go all the way back actually. Hopefully you can see this one. Go slow mo. You see the fire. You actually already see the fire occur here. And here's the other one in question. The Barry was actually showing where the actual laser was kind of hidden. So I'm gonna kind of go real slow. I was able to go back several days.
Boom. Right there.
Right here, it might be very difficult for you to see. But there is everything coming straight down right to this point.
We're
Let's see what my eyes, rather than looking at a video, and then it gets a lot more defined here. I don't know if you could actually see that on the video. Maybe.
Yeah, you can definitely see it.
Wow.
That's crazy.
You see those right
That fire was definitely started with a laser. I'm 100% convinced. Now we have some different satellite views or satellite imagery that this fire was definitely started with a laser. This is a black site.
But that is not real.
Exactly.
Unbelievable. Go back one more time.
We're gonna drop a link to this.
Right there, you see the lighting spot right up. This probably